They say a camera never lies, but what if it tells a truth so unbearable that no one can ever forget it? Imagine a child's laughter echoing through a quiet porch, the sound that should symbolize innocence and warmth, now forever linked to the memory of something unspeakable. Imagine a father who once held his son up to the sun like a treasure, now unable to meet his reflection in the mirror. And imagine a world where for 79 long days, the silent eyes of a security system recorded every scream, every bruise, every betrayal, yet no one was watching. This is not just a crime story. It is an autopsy of apathy. The tragedy of a little boy whose suffering was filmed in real time while adults looked away, and the world carried on as if nothing had happened. His name was Turner Wayne Simpkins, and this is not merely his story. It is a mirror held up to every parent, neighbor, teacher, and bystander who ever thought, someone else will do something. But what if no one does? What happens when love becomes negligence, when protection turns into silence, and when silence becomes fatal? Turner was only 5 years old, born on a summer day in 2018. His first cry filling a Nashville hospital room where his parents, young and unsteady but full of love, promised him the world. They named him Turner, and for a while, that name meant joy. Tiny footsteps across a wooden porch, backyard laughter that bounced off swing chains, the smell of fresh-cut grass and peanut butter sandwiches in the sun. He had a brother, Maverick, who was his world's other half, 2 small boys, bound by curiosity, mischief, and affection. In home videos, their giggles fill the air like music. Their father, Austin, beams behind the camera, a man proud to call himself Dad. To outsiders, it was the picture of normalcy, a young family in a small Tennessee town, a white picket dream in motion. But what no one could see was that somewhere inside that ordinary story, the first fracture had already begun. Because love, even the purest kind, is fragile when tested by neglect. In the beginning, there was warmth. Turner's world was built from the small, simple gestures that make childhood magical. Bedtime stories whispered in soft voices, pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, and a father's shoulders serving as his private throne above the crowd. His eyes sparkled with that kind of joy you can't fake, the sort that reflects absolute trust. To him, his father Austin hung the moon. They fished together, swam in backyard pools, and raced each other down grassy hills. Turner's laughter wasn't just sound. It was sunlight made audible. He was what every child should be, free, curious, and safe. But love stories can turn without warning. When Turner's parents, Austin and Sierra, parted ways, they promised to remain united for their sons, and for a while, they did. Turner spent weekends with his mother, surrounded by hugs and homemade cookies, and weekdays under his father's roof. From the outside, it looked like 2 homes full of love. But separation has a way of creating blind spots, and blind spots are where darkness breeds. Austin tried to rebuild his life, a young single father in need of stability. Then came Shannon. Lee Elliott, 24, a woman from nearby Springfield, who seemed, at first, like a breath of new beginnings. She smiled easily, spoke softly, and appeared eager to be part of a family. In every photograph, she seemed harmless, the kind of woman you trust to babysit your child. No one could have imagined what hid beneath that calm exterior. When Shannon moved in, she blended into Turner's world quietly, almost invisibly. She laughed at the boys' jokes, helped pack lunches, and watched movies with them. But sometimes, even in those early days, something subtle shifted. A cold glance, a flash of irritation when Turner sought attention, a shadow crossing her face when he hugged his father. Turner, being only 5, couldn't articulate what he felt. Children don't have the language for dread. They only know when love starts to feel unsafe. The first bruises came with explanations that seemed reasonable enough. He fell while playing. He bumped into furniture. Kids get hurt. That's what adults tell themselves. And Austin believed it, or perhaps chose to. The house that once echoed with laughter began to sound quieter. The swing outside moved less often, and Turner's smile started to fade around the edges. But no one stopped to ask why. Sometimes evil doesn't enter with a bang. It slips in through the front door wearing a smile. Shannon Elliott didn't storm into Austin's life. She settled into it like a shadow, learning the contours of light. At first, she seemed nurturing, even playful. She helped tidy up, cooked dinner, and told neighbors she adored Turner. But inside the walls of that small home on Poplar Ridge Road, subtle control began to replace companionship. Shannon started managing who Turner spoke to, what he did, where he went. "He's too wild," she'd say. "He needs discipline." And slowly, Austin stepped back. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was trust. Or maybe it was fear of confrontation, a weakness many confuse with peace. Turner didn't understand the shift. The warmth that had once defined his home was cooling fast. When Shannon looked at him, it wasn't with affection. It was with calculation. To her, this bright-eyed little boy wasn't a child. He was competition for attention, a reminder of love she could never fully own. That jealousy fermented into cruelty, the kind that doesn't need reason, only opportunity. It began quietly, a scolding here, a slap there. "He needs to learn respect," she'd say. Austin didn't question it. Perhaps he thought she was helping, that this was tough love. But love and control are opposites wearing the same costume. And what Turner needed wasn't structure, it was safety. The strange thing about abuse is how invisible it can be in plain sight. The bruises were small at first, the excuses believable. Shannon knew just how to hide the evidence, just how to craft the narrative. And Austin, a father desperate to believe he was building a new life, accepted it. He accepted the lies. Turner's world was shrinking. His laughter became rare, his voice quieter. He learned to read moods like survival cues, the way Shannon's tone changed before she struck, the way his father's silence followed. For a child, that kind of hyper-awareness isn't intelligence. It's trauma learning to speak. Each day, Turner's innocence was being rewritten, not by neglect, but by fear. And the most haunting part? There were cameras recording everything, yet no one was watching. What if the safest place in the world for a child, his parents' care, became the stage for his destruction? By May 2023, Shannon had woven herself completely into the fabric of Austin's life, and her control reached its final, chilling evolution. She began taking Turner with her to work, telling everyone it was because she didn't want to leave him home alone. It sounded nurturing, even admirable, a responsible adult looking after a child. But in reality, it was isolation disguised as care. Her workplace, a small automotive shop in Springfield, was equipped with security cameras, the kind meant to deter theft, not capture evil. Yet those silent lenses became the only witnesses to one of the most haunting acts of cruelty Tennessee would ever see. 79 days. That's how long those cameras watched. 79 days of recorded torment. Every slap, every kick, every scream swallowed into silence. On those takes, Turner's small frame moves cautiously through the background of an ordinary workday, blending into the machinery and oil-stained floors like a ghost too afraid to breathe. Shannon hits him when no one's looking, but sometimes even that line blurs because people were looking. Coworkers walked by, heard muffled cries, saw bruises. But they told themselves it wasn't their business. They chose comfort over confrontation, the same silence that kills more children than monsters ever could. Each frame of footage shows a little boy learning that pain has no end, that crying only makes it worse. At first, it's slaps, then punches, then full-force blows that lift his tiny body off the ground. He flinches, shields his head with trembling hands. Sometimes she strangles him, calmly, efficiently, until his body goes limp and lets him fall like a broken doll. It's methodical. It's deliberate. It's evil, filmed in high definition under fluorescent lights. And as the days pass, Turner changes. His eyes lose their spark. His laughter disappears completely. He moves slower, smaller, quieter. It's as though he's trying to take up less space in the world to become invisible enough to survive. But the truth is, invisibility can't save you when the person hurting you wants you gone. What makes this story unbearable isn't only what she did, it's that it happened in front of everyone. The footage reveals a child tortured in real time while adults sipped coffee, answered phones, and looked the other way. It's proof of what happens when empathy sleeps on the job. By the time summer came, Turner's world had completely changed. The sunshine that once filled his days now only illuminated the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves and small lies. It was June 2023, his 5th birthday, a day that should have been filled with cake, laughter, and the smell of fresh balloons. For a few fleeting hours it was. Shannon made sure of that. She dressed him carefully, covering every mark, making him look like any other happy little boy. When Turner's mother, Sierra, picked him up for the weekend, she saw nothing unusual. She saw her child smile. She didn't know that smile had become an act of survival. To Turner, that birthday wasn't celebration. It was a break in the storm. Because when he returned to his father's home, the violence only grew darker. The cameras kept recording, and what they captured in the weeks that followed was almost unwatchable. Shannon's cruelty had evolved into something ritualistic. The punches were harder, the slaps sharper, the silences longer. She began using starvation as punishment, withholding food until his small body trembled with hunger. His limbs grew thin, his clothes hung loose, his eyes, once the color of the sky, dulled into gray. She bit him too, not in impulse, but with intention, leaving marks the coroner would later describe as deliberate, methodical, proof that this was no moment of rage, but control disguised as discipline. The more Turner suffered, the quieter he became. He stopped singing the Disney songs that once filled his mornings. He stopped pretending to be Batman or Sonic or any of the heroes he loved. Because in his story, there were no heroes left. His father, once the center of his universe, had become a bystander in his own son's destruction. Austin saw the bruises, heard the cries, but did nothing. Maybe denial is easier than guilt. Maybe he thought it wasn't that bad. But for Turner, every silence was another betrayal. He still looked at his father like he hung the moon, even as that moon turned its face away. By mid-July, the footage shows a boy who barely moves. He sits in corners, staring at nothing, body limp, spirit broken. In those final days, even his breathing seemed shallow, mechanical, as if his small body was begging for rest. When the cameras stopped recording on July 19th, they didn't know they were about to stop capturing a life. 4 days later, on July 23rd, Turner Wayne Simpkins was gone. July 23rd, 2023. A date that should have been another humid Tennessee afternoon became a time stamp, carved into tragedy. The call came in around 4:30 p.m., a 5-year-old boy, unresponsive, found on the side deck of a home on Poplar Ridge Road. When first responders arrived, the quiet neighborhood looked ordinary. Trimmed lawns, dogs barking in the distance, sunlight glinting off porch rails. But inside that illusion of normalcy was a scene that would haunt even the most seasoned professionals. Turner's small body lay motionless, his skin pale, his temperature dangerously low 86 degrees Fahrenheit. His stomach was distended, his limbs cold, his skin mapped with bruises, lacerations, and deep bite marks. Paramedics tried to resuscitate him, but there was nothing left to save. He was gone before anyone could even say his name. Shannon Elliott stood nearby, calm, her story rehearsed. "Turner," she said, had fallen out of a moving car. He opened the back door while I was driving. She told officers, voice steady, but he said he was okay. She said he fell onto soft ground. Just a few scratches, nothing serious. But the evidence told another story. The car seat inside her SUV was spotless. No sign of damage. A Sonic drink still sat in the holder, ice unmelted. And the child locks? Engaged. Her lie unraveled within hours. The autopsy later revealed the truth in brutal detail. Turner hadn't fallen from anything. He had been beaten, starved, and crushed from within. His organs bore the marks of repeated trauma. His bones showed fractures in different stages of healing. The medical examiner, hardened by decades of work, said it was one of the worst cases of child torture he had ever seen. Even in death, Turner's body told his story. Every mark, every scar, every broken vessel a confession of what had been done to him. But what no one realized yet was that somewhere, in a small auto shop less than an hour away, the entire nightmare had been recorded. 79 days of proof, saved by chance, waiting to be found. Detectives from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation began piecing together the timeline. When they discovered Shannon's workplace had security cameras, they expected a few grainy clips, maybe fragments of evidence. What they found instead was a full documentary of evil. Hundreds of hours of footage. 79 days of suffering. A silent archive of pain no one should ever have to watch. The investigators who reviewed those tapes would later say it changed them forever. When detectives first pressed play, no one breathed. The footage flickered to life in silence. A small room, dull fluorescent lights, a couch pushed against the wall, and a child sitting perfectly still. There were no jump cuts, no edits, no sound beyond the hum of machines. For 79 days, those cameras recorded everything Shannon Elliott did to Turner Simpkins, and what they revealed was something no one could prepare for. It wasn't just violence, it was the systematic breaking of a human being. Investigators watched as Shannon turned an ordinary workplace into a torture chamber. One moment she'd be scrolling on her phone. The next, she'd strike him with her fist, her knee, her foot. She bit him. She strangled him. She threw him across furniture. She forced him into dark bathrooms for hours. Lights off, no food, no sound, except for the small, muffled sobs of a boy who had learned not to hope. Turner didn't fight back anymore. He simply endured, because endurance was all he had left. Over 1,000 strikes were counted. 74 instances of strangulation. The kind of precision that shows not rage, but control. Even after decades on the job, hardened detectives left the room shaking, some in tears, some unable to continue. One investigator said it was like watching a child's soul leave his body frame by frame. Those recordings became the backbone of the case. Indisputable, time-stamped, undeniable. Every frame was a plea for help the world had ignored in real time. When prosecutors played segments in court, the gallery fell silent. Journalists stopped taking notes. Even the judge, a man who had presided over murder and death penalty cases, looked away more than once. The video showed not just abuse, it showed the collapse of morality in slow motion. Shannon didn't just hurt Turner. She studied how far she could go. There were moments she'd look directly into the camera, almost taunting it, as if daring the world to intervene. It's one thing to imagine evil. It's another to watch it unfold while everyone around remains still. When the footage was finally shown to the court, the horror lasted 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Grown men cried. Detectives walked out. Even the defense attorney, stone-faced throughout, couldn't meet his client's eyes. In the middle of it all, the image of Turner, frail, bruised, silent, lingered longer than any sentence could. When justice finally spoke, it did so through trembling voices. On March 4, 2024, the Cheatham County Grand Jury officially charged Shannon Lee, Elliot with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of aggravated child abuse. She was only 26 years old, but what she had done aged her soul beyond redemption. When officers came to arrest her, she didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply nodded, as though she had been expecting this moment all along. In the courtroom that summer, the walls seemed to close in around the weight of what was being said. The prosecution detailed every wound, every injury, every instance where Turner's small frame met her rage. For 20 straight minutes, they read the facts of the case, the kind of facts that twist your stomach and make you question the very fabric of human nature. Shannon sat motionless, her expression empty. The judge, David Wolf, had presided over thousands of cases in his career. Murderers, traffickers, men who'd taken lives without remorse, but as the words filled the room, even he looked away, visibly shaken. He had seen darkness before, but never something this calculated, this cold. When the time came for sentencing, Shannon entered a plea of no contest. It was a hollow phrase, an acknowledgement without admission, an attempt to end the process without facing the truth. But the truth had already been played for the world to see. The judge's voice trembled as he delivered his ruling. Life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 51 years. He stared at her and said, "I've never heard more horrific facts in my entire life." The room fell silent. No sighs, no gasps, just the weight of what had been done to a child who should have turned 6 that summer. As Shannon was led away in handcuffs, the faint sound of chains echoed against the marble floor, a sound that felt too light for the heaviness of her crimes. Outside, the sky over Tennessee was gray, and a light rain began to fall, as if the world itself couldn't bear what it had witnessed. But even as she disappeared behind bars, one truth remained unfinished, because the person who should have protected Turner the most hadn't been held accountable. Not yet. For months after Shannon's sentencing, there was a strange, uneasy quiet around the name Simpkins. The world had moved on, or tried to. News outlets stopped airing her mugshot. The courtroom doors had closed. But grief doesn't follow legal calendars. In early January 25, that silence broke again when headlines lit up across Tennessee. Father of murdered child arrested for neglect. The name was one the public recognized. Austin Gordon Simpkins, Turner's father. The man who had once lifted his son onto his shoulders to watch fireworks was now in handcuffs, accused not of what he did, but of what he refused to do. Investigators had gone back through the footage, the medical reports, and the testimony, and one fact became impossible to ignore. Austin had known. He had seen the bruises, heard the cries, noticed the fear that clouded his son's eyes every time Shannon entered the room. He had even been home during the final hours of Turner's life. And yet he stayed silent. The law calls it failure to protect. But what do you call a father's silence when his child is dying just a few feet away? Detectives said he admitted to hearing Turner's pain, but didn't want to cause conflict. Conflict. That word became an open wound. The idea that comfort and peace had been prioritized over a child's life. When he was arrested, Austin looked hollow, like a man haunted not by accusation, but by the echo of his son's last breath. The community, once sympathetic, turned cold. His neighbors spoke in disbelief. He was such a good dad. But that's the thing about evil. It rarely begins with monsters. It begins with hesitation, with the lie that someone else will step in. Austin's charges were heavy. Aggravated child neglect, abuse, and endangerment. But what Turner had lost couldn't be measured by legal codes. The boy who adored his father until his final breath had been betrayed not by strangers, but by silence. And that is the kind of betrayal that corrodes faith in the very idea of family. This wasn't just one man's failure. It was a mirror reflecting every person who ever saw a bruise and said nothing. every teacher who dismissed a quiet child, every friend who didn't ask the uncomfortable question. Austin's arrest wasn't just about punishment. It was about accountability. Because without it, we learn nothing. And children like Turner keep dying while the world looks away. Even after the trials ended and the courtroom lights dimmed, Turner's story refused to fade. It lived in the files of detectives who couldn't sleep, in the quiet nightmares of paramedics who had carried his small body, in the echoes of a question that no one could answer. How did no one stop this? When a tragedy this deep unfolds, it isn't just about one victim. It's about the cracks in every wall that should have protected him. The cameras had done their job. The systems had not. A child protection network that never intervened. A community that looked away. A father who stayed silent. Each played a part in a death that should never have happened. Turner's legacy is more than evidence. It's a warning carved into our collective conscience. Every day somewhere, another child is living a smaller version of his story. Bruises hidden, laughter fading, waiting for someone to notice. When we talk about justice, we often imagine it as punishment. But true justice is prevention. It's a teacher noticing when a child withdraws. A neighbor asking when something doesn't sound right. A friend daring to confront instead of staying polite. Turner's story teaches that evil isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides behind normalcy. Sometimes it looks like a smiling face at a dinner table. But what gives evil its power isn't its presence. It's our silence. The detectives who watched those tapes said they'd never be the same again. One of them, in an interview months later, said quietly, "I wish someone had seen him the way we did, before it was too late." That's the haunting truth. Turner's life could have been saved 100 different ways. All it needed was one adult brave enough to break the silence. We can't undo what happened to him, but we can choose what happens next. His story demands more than sympathy. It demands vigilance. It demands that we stop saying it's not my business when a child cries. Because in that hesitation lies the difference between life and loss. Turner Wayne Simpkins may have been only 5 years old, but in his short life, he exposed the darkness of complacency and the unbearable cost of looking away. His laughter, though silenced, is a call to every parent, every neighbor, every teacher, every human being, to act, to see, to speak. Because silence didn't just kill him. It keeps killing others. If we remember that, if we truly listen, then maybe, just maybe, his story won't have been in vain. The story of Turner Simpkins isn't about monsters. It's about the danger of silence. It reminds us that neglect isn't always loud, and evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it's a quiet choice to do nothing. The lesson is simple but urgent. Awareness is protection, and action saves lives. Don't look away.